Hey guys, my name is Brittany Ryan, and I will be giving you a short presentation on Chapter 20, which is Feedback and Coaching, Disciplining and Terminating Staff. So let's get started. A short little introduction. As a manager, one of the most challenging and stressful concepts is staying in tune with the performance of your employees, as far as providing constructive feedback as well as reaching for success. An effective manager should not only focus on poor performance, but also give positive feedback. And this can sometimes be a challenge because they constantly want to improve the unit and patient care, but not having that positive feedback to staff can actually damage how a unit runs and its performance. So here are some objectives for the presentation. We will be describing what feedback is and its key to success, describing the important elements of effective coaching. We will be comparing and contrasting coaching and feedback, examine how to effectively address poor performance, describe the guidelines of progressive discipline, and then explain the essentials of termination. So let's start with feedback. Feedback can either be positive or constructive. Overall, it helps with employees to improve their performance, and this is a priority to most managers in order to have the best patient care possible around the unit. Nurse managers should be the only one doing this type of evaluation, and it can either be feedback from other nurses, physicians, family members. And since I work night shift, my manager is not always present during the evening and night shift. So a lot of this responsibility falls onto the charge nurse, and then they are able to relay back to the manager. Again, sometimes when the manager isn't present, it can be very difficult for a manager. My manager actually leaves at 3 p.m., so that whole other part of evening and night shift is very challenging. To catch some of those issues, they can be very small, such as texting on the unit, or they can be big issues that could impair patient care and clinical judgment. I know when I was orienting a new nurse, she was having some issues concentrating, and she kept making med errors, which can be very life-threatening to patients. So instead of me just going back and relaying to my manager, I asked the new nurse what her issue was and how she thought she was doing. And she explained to me that she was having trouble falling asleep during the day. So when she came back to night shift, she was very sleep deprived, which I can understand as a new nurse. That can be an issue. So when I followed up with my manager, we both kind of gave her ways to sleep better throughout the night. And then my manager was constantly following up with me, and this can be very important for the manager to be physically present on the unit to assess the dynamics of the unit. So some keys to successful feedback. It's important to be timely and ongoing. Feedback should be given as soon as an event happens or when something is observed. Feedback should be goal reference, meaning that feedback should be linked to certain steps to achieve a goal, whether it's time or information. Feedback should be constructive and positive, not only focusing on improvement, but also praising the unit as well. I know in my unit we have Recognition Friday during shift huddle every morning. So any staff member is able to voice when someone on the unit did something helpful. Feedback should be tangible and transparent, meaning the behavior should be described clearly, and then the staff member should be able to reflect on their own behaviors, and then finally the manager can then coach in order to help that improved behavior. And then finally, feedback should be respectful and encourages reflection. When something is needed to be discussed, it should be in a private area. The manager should remain calm and not jump to conclusions. And finally, the employee should be able to then reflect on and improve upon behavior. Next, we will be talking about coaching. So coaching is like a relationship so that an individual can grow into their own professional role with skills and abilities. It is usually goal-oriented, and the coach is able to guide through a learning experience, such as being a preceptor. And in order for somebody to be coached effectively, they should be ready, willing, and able. They should be ready socially, mentally, and physically. They should have the willingness to learn and make mistakes and be able to evaluate changes within one's practice. And they should be able to accept, again, new changes and become resilient. Nursing has its bad days and its good days. So once a bad day is over, the next day can be a new day. So what is the difference between feedback and coaching? They sound very, very similar, but they have its specifics with differences and purposes. So feedback is focused on the now, while coaching is focused on future forward. Feedback assesses performance, while coaching kind of builds upon performance. Feedback can unfortunately share a consequence, while coaching can include behavior modification. And finally, feedback can be positive with rewards, when coaching can include educational advancement or maybe career development. So next we're going to talk about confronting. As a staff member, what's provided with feedback and then the behavior doesn't change, this can be the next step. It's often a more serious level of interaction that must be documented within the unit. And this takes some experience with managers, and managers should be coached from a professional member. They could be using maybe a nursing supervisor or human resources as a backup. Next, we will be talking about discipline, and this calls for the attention of a staff member when a behavior is not appropriate or corrected after being advised how to correct it or why to correct it. It is highly dictated by an organization's policies and procedures. And discipline should not be taken personally, but it should be a wake-up call for an improvement for that staff member. In order for effective discipline, all the facts should be carefully gathered, thoroughly and carefully, with the use of the proper policies and procedures. Expectations should be clarified by a nursing supervisor or human resources. The act of discipline should never be acted upon when a manager is angry. Everybody should remain calm. The act should be consistent with all staff members, no matter how long or short a staff member has been there. The discipline should be private, and limits should be set with all sides of every story. A plan for action and remediation should be in place for the future. And then finally, a reflection should be required for both the staff member and how or what they should change. And most importantly, the action should be documented appropriately and filed with the nursing manager, and then maybe a supervisor or human resources can follow up with a proper evaluation. Next, we will be talking about progressive discipline. This is the process in which there are several warnings or repeated violations by a staff member that can lead to termination. The manager must have documentation in regards to all events and the feedback of the employee, which can include their behavior, the plan that was set up, or any coaching that was done. It can begin with an oral warning, which is given during unacceptable behavior that has happened once, such as calling off sick over a weekend or maybe a holiday. And then sometimes a manager can jump to a written warning, also making sure that the violation is clear, such as maybe a nurse not scanning medications appropriately. If there's a written warning, then the nurse can understand why that's not good for patient care and it can jeopardize patient care. And then in some cases, actions can be taken a step further, such as termination or suspension, depending on the severity of the act, such as substance abuse or maybe accessing a patient's chart with violation of privacy. Next, we will be talking about termination. This can be a very serious action by the manager taking financial, emotional, and legal responsibility. This is the process that ends employment for the individual. This should be done very, very carefully and should be documented every step of the way to avoid any legal trouble. And then the process has to be done with human resources and the nursing administration for approval and preparing. And things to be considered when the action is taken: the employee's file and track record, any unit feedback, any performance standards of the unit, coaching and remediation that was done with the staff member, and how the employee will cope with the termination. And then when the action does take into place, all belongings should be taken away from the staff member that belongs to the organization, such as any keys or their badge, and then they have to be escorted out of the building, whether it be with a manager, the supervisor, or even a security guard. And then most importantly, the whole thing has to be documented, and it has to be documented as an incident. So here is a short 1-minute video, 1 to 2-minute video. It kind of goes over that bad preceptor and what not to do if you're having a new member on the unit. And then finally, here is a video of a good preceptor and what to do if there is a new person on the unit. So I thank you guys for listening. Please comment anything, and I hope that you guys have a good rest of the semester.